Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.
And hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us. In terms of the domestic news flow, the summer months can be a bit lethargic, setting aside national politics in a presidential election year, which admittedly is setting aside a lot. But in recent days, the economy has given the two major party tickets some competition for the headlines. A scare in the stock market, a slowdown in U.S. hiring, though a more encouraging Arkansas report, interest rate angst, and worries about consumer spending, inflation, consumer debt, all of that, leading some to question whether that dreaded R word is about to come into play in a major way. So to help us wade through all of that and what it means for Arkansas, Mervin Jebaraj of the University of Arkansas's Economic Research Center. And here in the studio, Randy Zook, President and CEO of the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce. Gentlemen, as always, thanks for coming in. Mervin, let's go to you first. What is kind of, obviously, it's sort of a mixed bag. The economy, Arkansas and the U.S., not always in perfect sync, and not this time as well. Where are we? What's going on?
I mean, I think, if we don't look at the headlines from the last week and a half, we'd say that the economy is still in a very healthy place. So just a few weeks ago, we got report that the U.S. economy in the second quarter grew a lot faster than most people were expecting, well over 2.5%. So what has started this scare has been the one unemployment report at the national level, which indicated that the unemployment rate had climbed to 4.3%. Keep in mind the unemployment rate here is about a whole percent lower. And this is just one unemployment report. There might have been some vagaries associated with the weather here. There are always revisions to this data. But I think we can say maybe that the national economy is cooling. It's not slowing, but it's certainly a little cooler than where it was last year or even at the end of last year.
Right. Randy Zook, what do you see?
I would agree totally with Mervin. It's a single data point. It's no reason to go nuts or crazy. Hiring is still strong, not as strong perhaps as it was just a few months ago, but still positive. There are more people hiring than not, and employers are continuing to be challenged to find the people they need to meet the customer demand that they've got. So the economy in Arkansas is still healthy, but eventually the Fed prevails. That's just all there is to it. So I'm looking for some kind of continued slowing of the economy until the recession gives us a little clearer picture, and that's what business people look for. They look for certainty, or at least reasonable expectations, and knowing what the rules of the game are, and that's going to be determined in the national election. So there's going to be some caution before we get there. So, but overall, good, strong, except for crop prices in eastern Arkansas, and we're still a ag-driven state. We're a farm-driven state, and that's a big question mark, the prices of crops.
Even before, well, there's something important too before the November election, and that's next month. There's a September meeting of the Fed. What do you see happening?
I can argue it flat or argue it round.
Crystal ball time.
Crystal ball, my guess is they make a move and maybe cut by a quarter point. I hope it's not any more than that, because that would signal some sort of deeper concern on their part than I think is justified. So I would look for a quarter point drop.
Yeah, those interest rates, Mervin, are obviously important to Arkansas, business, Arkansas everywhere. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think the real interest rate, so that's the difference between what the federal funds rate is and the rate of inflation. So keep in mind the rate of inflation is a lot closer to what the Fed says their target is, which is 2% on the headline personal consumption expenditures. That's about 2.5% right now. On a 3-month average, it's a little lower. So I think they're probably at their goal. They've been there for a little while if you don't include shelter prices, which again have some vagaries in how they're calculated. So I think the market is pricing in a 0.5% decrease. That is probably more than what the Federal Reserve is willing to do, but it wouldn't be out of line with what we think the real interest rate should be at this point in our cycle.
Yeah, Randy Zook.
I would agree. You know, the market may be expecting a half. I hope they don't go any more than a quarter, but you never know. We'll see when we see.
Well, it would seem to have some competing forces at work here.
Absolutely.
Take off on that.
Well, the competing forces are, you know, they've got two objectives: full employment and inflation. So they're conflicting sometimes, and we've had cheap, almost no cost money for way too long, which has caused the inflationary cycle or outburst that we're trying to work our way out of. So they've got a tough job, but at the end of the day, they've got to make a call. And look, I could see them making a 0.5 point move, but I hope they make a 1/4 point move.
What do you see inflation doing?
As Mervin said, it's close to where their target is, but if you go to the grocery store, there's a lot more inflation out there than 2 or 2.5 points. And we ran up so far so fast, and we're not going to come down that quickly. Prices will not drop as quickly as they went up in most cases. Now, there are exceptions to that, but the price of gasoline, the price of groceries,
fuels, yeah.
Those are the basics that hit everybody nearly every day, and they're the pain points. And until you see significant change in the production of oil and gas across the country, energy is going to continue to stay close to where it is right now. But there are opportunities there to move that down with increased production. But you know, the international stuff has got those markets just, you know, right on a razor's edge. They're very sensitive to geopolitics right now, rightly so. Hot spots all around the globe. We could be in a deep ditch pretty quickly in a lot of places, several places.
Yeah. Mervin.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would expect the inflation rate to stay within 0.1% of where it is today. So 2.5, 2.4, 2.6. I don't see us getting to 2%, their target, anytime this year. But again, as I mentioned, that in part is because home prices are still elevated, and the way it's calculated in those measures has a long lag time. So we're still seeing some of the peak housing prices that are no longer there in large metro areas around the country. So I think, you know, the price increases that we've seen happen over a longer period of time, those are not going away. So the level of prices have climbed, as Randy mentioned, in groceries, gas prices, whatever they are, those are not going away. What we care about more is the rate of change, and that's what the Federal Reserve is paying attention to, and that has definitely slowed. So yes, prices of eggs or bacon are not what they were in 2019, but the pace of change has certainly slowed and is a more normal level now.
Randy Zook, the Arkansas Treasury continues to get, it's a robust treasury by any standard. The tax cuts that have been enacted thus far, notwithstanding.
Well, I mean,
continue to beat estimates anyway, forecasts anyway.
Yeah.
Obviously, collections as a whole are down.
Yeah, our view as business, I'm speaking on behalf of business owners and managers, lower tax rates create better business conditions, and we think that's proving to be true. Arkansas's economy is very healthy right now relative to where we were back during the pandemic, of course, and even prior to that. We've got healthy growth in our population, 14th fastest growing population in the country. Our problem there, or challenge, is that it's unevenly distributed across the state, but healthy population growth, healthy GDP growth rate, healthy employment, lots of jobs still available if you've got the right skills and are in the right places and are willing to go to work.
Well, if all the components of the economy, including the Fed, can bring that baby in for this proverbial soft landing.
That's the holy grail right now, is the soft landing. And so far, they've been able to pull it off. You just hope for something not not getting some sort of cataclysmic event that interrupts this process.
Sure. Mervin, Jebaraj, that a lot of this is based on the robust consumer spending, and it continues apace.
Yeah, and I think that's what's reflected in the state's treasuries collecting higher levels of taxes. So you've seen income tax withholdings are up, corporate tax collections are up as well. Now they're a little lower than where they were a couple of years ago. Again, the economy is not nearly as hot as it was a few years ago. So we expected some cooling in the collections of income taxes and corporate taxes, and we've seen that. I think maybe the longer horizon concern is that consumers are switching over from buying a lot of goods like they were in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic to buying a lot more services like we used to before the pandemic. And a lot fewer services are sales taxable than goods in Arkansas. So when we think about collections of sales tax, a good chunk of that comes from sales tax collections. As consumers make the switch over to services away from goods, that will automatically reduce sales tax collection somewhat in the state of Arkansas as well.
Well, to the matter of a soft landing, assuming that we can still manage one, how tenuous is the situation now? The stock market's obviously got a big jolt over the past several days. There was a scare for about 36, 48 hours there.
Well, I mean, I think the stock market certainly probably overreacted to the one unemployment report. And then a few days later, we got the initial claims, which is a measurement of how many people are making unemployment claims. And that was very normal, not concerning, and the stock market backtracked. And I think some of this is international as well. We've seen the Bank of Japan raise rates, and that caused quite a bit of consternation for those people involved in the yen carry trade. So I won't go into the details of what all that means, but there's some unwinding happening because of what other central banks are doing as well. So I don't know that it is as concerning, but any large one-day drop like we've seen certainly draws attention.
Yeah, Randy Zook, we got a lot of global markets that Arkansas services.
Well, we do, starting with our farm commodities, gas, all kinds of things. Aerospace products, defense contractor sales in South Arkansas. So we're pretty sensitive to all that stuff. But, at the end of the day, the economy, we've got lots of construction going on, both vertical as well as mostly highway construction. But the largest single capital investment in the history of the state is just about to begin to operate, namely the second U.S. steel mill in Mississippi County. And we're hiring and training for that startup. So the Walmart corporate headquarters project in Mervin's neighborhood is opening, as just nearly day by day with new parts of it. And it's just an incredible project, beautiful thing. And it's drawing, they're getting more and more people moving in from around the country to those jobs in Northwest Arkansas, led by Walmart. But all over the state, there's just healthy economic conditions, businesses that are growing but challenged and to find the talent they need, and sensitive to the interest rates. So we need we need to focus on housing in a lot of places. We're short. We're behind the curve nationally on housing starts. So there are a lot of upside opportunities in the economy driven by population growth, productivity growth, AI, all kinds of positive things going on in the economy. But there are going to be hiccups in a market economy. Price signals change behavior, and behavioral changes translate into spooky stock markets. But the stock market was way out over its skis. Valuations were at historically high levels. We were overly dependent on 7 stocks. But now we were way overdue for a correction, and this is a pretty modest one that we've gone through.
Yeah, a few seconds left, and I want to give it to Mervin because the few elements of the economy are as important. It's a crucial element, and that's mortgage rates. A bit of good news lately. Mervin?
Well, certainly, if you can take away some good news from the market scare in the last week, the yields on U.S. 10-year treasuries dropped rather dramatically, and that helped push the mortgage rate about 0.5% lower. So we're in the 6 to 6.5 range, a lot lower than the close to 7 range that we were. I think that helps home buyers. It helps some people think about selling their houses that were not wanting to move from their very low mortgage rates. But my larger fear is that there is such a housing shortage in our major cities here in Arkansas and around the country that the lower mortgage rate just spikes the prices immediately.
Got to end it there because we're simply out of time. Mervin, Jebaraj, Randy Zook, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming in, and come back soon, both of you. And we'll be right back. And we are back. The first grant to UAMS arrived about 5 years ago, and the National Institutes of Health evidently was pleased, for it has now renewed its commitment, this time to almost $32 million. We're talking about a program involving what is termed translational research, sort of an umbrella grant that permits UAMS to underwrite a variety of clinical training and research programs. Dr. Laura James is a central administrator of the UAMS Translational Research Institute, and she joins us now. Dr. James, thanks very much for coming aboard. Maybe you better take us to school. What's involved here in translational research?
Great question. Thank you, Steve, for having me on today. Translational research is really trying to take new discoveries and push them out to basically beyond academics or beyond a laboratory, and push them out to communities and to people so that they will make a difference in healthcare. So that's a very broad definition, but that's basically the essence of translational research.
So we're talking about more than research, are we not, Doctor? We're talking about delivery of services, of clinical services as well.
Right, but we can involve research to come up with the best way to deliver services. So you're probably familiar with UAMS's programs in telehealth. We've used telehealth a lot in the past to actually deliver clinical care. Probably one of the best examples was during COVID. But we know that for many of our rural populations in Arkansas, telehealth may be a way to operationalize how we administer care. So research questions are how to do that in the best way.
What is the gap here that this translational program filled? Is it research and services, or what does it bring to the table? Yeah.
Really, our program is all more research, but trying to figure out what are the best ways to encourage either healthcare systems or practicing physicians or communities to uptake new research findings. So the traditional way that physicians are trained, they get a lot of their education, of course, early in their career. New medications or new approaches come out, and we want to make sure that those new findings really get translated into clinical practice. So it's all about bringing new things in so that they become the standard of care in clinical practice or in how we evaluate patients in the hospital. It's also trying to use new approaches to touch people where they are. So we know that particularly in Arkansas and in other southern states where we have lots of populations that live in rural areas, we know that their opportunities to see healthcare providers may be somewhat limited. So how can we take that gap, which may be access to care, and come up with new approaches that people can benefit from the latest therapies? Telehealth example of that.
Right. Well, that was kind of my next question. are there demographic targets or geographic targets in Arkansas that this program is particularly designed to address?
Great question. So we are really interested in our health outcomes as a state and how we can improve the health of all citizens of Arkansas. Our emphasis is more on rural health, but we integrate that across many populations, really kind of covering the broad age span from day one to on up to our aging populations.
Well, in terms of targeting, then, are we talking, doctor, also about there are a number of chronic conditions which are chronically afflicting Arkansas, have for decades, a century or longer. Is there a specific role for this program in in addressing those ailments?
Yes, definitely. So we specifically are not disease aligned because we want our resources to be broadly available to be leveraged for the treatment of any type of disease. At UAMS, we have, of course, a lot of emphasis on cancer. We kind of think of the Translational Research Institute as targeting, to use that word, non-cancer diseases. So that could be very broad, from diabetes, heart disease, management of hypertension, management of mental health conditions. So we're covering a very broad range of diseases, but we think that having more up-to-date approaches, for example, using electronic health records to understand more about disease patterns, as we use existing technology, new ways of managing patients, that we can leverage that infrastructure to touch patients better in the future.
Well, by renewing the grant, the not the CDC, but the NIH, I guess, obviously was satisfied or pleased with what it saw in the first phase of this program. Right. Are we going to expand the program, or just continue it, or what do you?
We definitely want to expand, and the NIH is giving every CTSA program across the country 7 years of funding as opposed to the 5 years of funding. So we were fortunate in that we received the third most competitive score when we submitted our grant. And that's certainly a compliment to all the many fine folks at UAMS, including research staff, our medical staff, people that are in other colleges, such as the College of Public Health. So what's so exciting to me about this grant is it really is a team effort. Team science is something that we embrace in our work. We really recognize that many of the problems in Arkansas and really across the United States require that we're working together in teams, and that we're pulling in people that may have been trained a different way or have a different mastery of skills that represent a different discipline. But we really need all of those great approaches and people coming together to solve some of these more challenging conditions. You mentioned diabetes, and how can we better detect diabetes? How can we treat it better? How can we make sure that patients that have diabetes really have access to healthcare services? We know that in many of these rural areas, we just don't have enough physicians there. So it's trying to address those very challenging medical and social problems so that people are really getting better health care.
Looking back at the program thus far, doctor, you mentioned diabetes and kidney ailments. Are there some specific things that you would point to with special satisfaction or pride even?
Yeah, I think that we have really come a long way in medicine and in Arkansas in recognizing how important it is to work with folks in the community. We can't just come in and say we have the solution for how to fix this problem. We really need to do that in collaboration with community members. We call that community engagement, and we see that many more of our research programs across UAMS are recognizing the extreme value of that and working with communities to understand their needs, understand what's important to them, and then partnering together to come up with strategies to better detect disease, treat disease, ultimately benefit probably of the state, the state we're.
Dr. Laura James, we thank you so much at UAMS. We thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming aboard. Come back soon.
Thanks so much, Steve.
All right. And that does it for us for this week. As always, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.